So my name is Kalann Washington. Pronouns are he, him. I am a black man. Lived in America, my whole life. Grew up in Pennsylvania. Uh, and I lived in Illinois for a little bit. It was a small stint there, but as far as dance goes, especially as far as blues goes, actually my first introduction to social dance, anything was Lindy Hop, and I went for a small period. I'd say about overall about a year and a half, but a really intense pocket. I'd say for about 3 months. That was kind of my first just going to classes and seeing kind of what this thing was. And the school that I went to was it was a PWI, right? And it was really there's a lot there were a lot of things that I encountered, especially as an athlete. So I wrestled, and in Pennsylvania, wrestling is a very serious sport. Like it's bigger than it's bigger than a lot of other sports. Basketball and football and this that and the third. Like PA and wrestling are deeply tied together. Um, and so kind of coming from that world and then going to Lindy, I'd hear music that I knew was black music, right? Like this is music that I'm like, oh yeah, this is me, this is my history, this is my people. But the way that it was taught and who it was taught by was I want to say I think it was all white folks teaching, minus one person who would occasionally float in. And I think because of where we were, I don't know what they were going through, right? But there wasn't a lot of appreciation, or I'd say history being taught. So Lindy didn't really stick for me. It was like, oh, this is fun. Looks like folks are having fun. But when I have, 17, 18, 19 people asking me, oh, are you going to the World War II? I'm like, I don't want to. That doesn't appeal to me. I'm like, what do I have to go through the back door, or like what's the like I'm like that just doesn't appeal to me. So Lindy didn't stick for me for that reason, there were other reasons too, right? But I was like, oh, this looks like fun for y'all, but like I don't feel home here. Like this doesn't feel like me. And that was a sense that I carried while I was there in that school. Even wrestling, and I love the dudes that I wrestled with. But even then, there were things that just like they just didn't get. There was experience they just didn't have. Like my team was predominantly white, so like there were things folks just didn't understand, and that was a part where I'd say I don't say I struggled with identity, but I definitely had this sense of there just something was missing in terms of the people that I spent time with. Being at the school, and it's a Christian school. Me growing up as a Christian, and I mean, and then I'd say I'm still practicing and everything, but being there was interesting because I could relate on that part, but not on the black part. Like there were just folks, they just didn't get it. There were things that like, and I felt like I was constantly in these situations where I'm explaining what a microaggression even is. Where and there's grace, right? This is the Christian side where like there's grace for folks, especially like when folks don't know, and they don't know that they don't know. It was a it was a struggle. I ain't gonna lie. It was a struggle to not be upset about things where I'm like, they just don't know. Like there are some folks where like I was the first black person they met, you know. Like I was like it was just me. And so I get questions like, oh, is this okay? Can I say this? Can I do like or even and this is I'll tie back to dance in a moment, but there was a person who God bless him, but he said he said just totally serious. He was like, "Oh, well, you're good at wrestling because you're black. Y'all are just good at athletics." And that he said it with such a straight face, like it was just so matter of fact and so casual the way he said it. Like I know he didn't mean anything malicious by it, but I'm like, dog, let me talk to you real quick. Let me explain to you why what you're saying is wrong on so many levels, right? And that was like that was just the experiences that like that was the norm for so long. that when when I did have my core friend group, and I love them so much. Who it was honestly it was mostly mostly people of color. It was mostly there was a lot of black and brown folks. Like when we all just naturally kind of got together, it felt like this is the thing that I was missing, you know. As much as I had love for a lot of my other friends there and the relationships that I got to develop, that was my friend group. That was my core group. They were the reason that I was like, oh, I didn't leave, that I didn't drop out. Because there were definitely points where I was like, yeah, I don't think this is for me. And it makes you question if you're even supposed to be there, not just at that particular place, right? But like, is this a higher education thing for me? Like, is this a place that I belong? Because if you don't have people who look like you there, sometimes you can really struggle with this sort of vision of what me at the finish line looks like, you know. So definitely thankful thankful for my people. I'll say that much. Um, Circling back to dance, kind of at that 3 month point, I was introduced to salsa and bachata. And the funny thing about that is when I was introduced to salsa and bachata, I kind of like I took to it more naturally. But I also think that's because the people that I was around, you know, the friends like my friends there, they knew more about the history of salsa and bachata, and I think I was able to see myself in it more immediately, where folks are like, oh, this is an Afro Latin dance, like this is part of Black history. This has roots here and here. It's not just it's not just here, it's here, right? And I felt like through that I was able to kind of sink into it a little bit more, versus being shown Lindy, and it's like it was all white folks there, so immediately that appealed to me, right? But I also think when I was introduced to blues, my first blues, whatever, I was just telling somebody the other day about this, but my blues experience was interesting because it was kind of the tail end of my Lindy experience, right? And or I won't say Lindy experience, but that first 3 months where I was like going to classes, I was like in it, I was like doing all the things, right? And I just done my first like social Jack and Jill, all that stuff, right? Like I did all that, right? I was locked in. There's a photo somewhere, and they had a late night after, and I hadn't been introduced to blues dancing. I was familiar with blues like music. I remember I was like writing. I wrote a paper on what was it? It was on was it John Lee Hooker, I think, and then Muddy Waters. Yeah, Muddy Waters. Yeah, in his transition into using like electronic guitars and things like that. Like I was in it, and I enjoyed blues music. Like I was very much a fan of that, and like Robert Johnson and what and like when I got this is what I have in my mind. Like I'm thinking, oh, we're gonna be listening to this kind of music, and it's gonna be kind of like the vibe. This is like early what 20 this might be 2011, 2012, maybe 2013, somewhere in that pocket, right? And so we go to it was like you have like the student union, and then you have this kind of like other area where you could just kind of have little meetings and get-togethers and stuff. It's kind of small, but you could have like a small class. You could fit maybe like 30 people in there, that type of thing, right? And they had the lights all dark and everything, and the chairs are all moved out, so it's just the floor and the lights and the music. And I was like, this is interesting. How are you supposed to see? You can't really see. Like you can't really see. Unlike like the Lindy room earlier, it was like it was on, this popping big auditorium lights, all that good stuff. And I'm like, this is interesting. How are we supposed to dance here? I can't see nothing. Like I can't see. And the person was like, "Do you want, do you want to dance?" I was like, "Yeah, sure." Like, okay, I don't know how to do this though. They're like, "Oh, you don't? All right, cool." And immediately they go like right to close embrace. Like there was like no warm up, no prep, no like heads up. It was like this is what it is. And I'm like, oh, okay. So what are we naming the children? Like what's the like that that should because this mind you, look, I'm at a Christian school, right? Up until this point, this was like I had no frame for this. I was like, oh, so we go together. That's what this is. That's just what this is. Like, all right, cool. Like, all right, like, so What kind of dog do you want? Like, I was locked in. I was like, all right, that's just what this is. And it definitely took, I think it took a lot of, it took a lot of learning to unlearn that. I'll say that much, right? But that was my understanding of what blues dance was. And, it was, it was really interesting kind of like looking back on it, especially reading your questions and stuff, and kind of seeing like how my how my understanding has changed. But that was my first introduction into blues and into Lindy. And it was, I mean, I'm not surprised it didn't stick. Looking at it now, and maybe my like, dance trajectory would be wildly different if it was introduced in a different way, right? But that's just what I understood. That was blues. That's just how it was supposed to be. It had to be like this. It had to be this close embrace thing. And it was always like tied to being sensual, even if the music didn't necessarily call for that. And in a lot of ways, it reminds me of what has happened with with bachata actually in recent years, especially with the bachazouk movement, or bachata sensual movement, where it truly is a Europeanized version of
Mm.
bachata. Like that's what it is. Like the person who introduced bachata central to the world is literally European. Like he was a dude who was like, oh, I want to take these elements of these other dances and then introduce this to the world. And I don't have an issue with fusion. Like fusion is my main dance now. Like that's my main thing. I love it. I breathe it. I bleed fusion, right? Like, but you can't just take something and then not also teach the history. You can't just take it like you're appropriating a culture, and you're not doing justice to anyone by sharing this misinformation. You're doing a lot to damage the history, the culture, and my main issue is that there's this understanding that bachata central is bachata, and that like traditional is like a secondary thing. Like, no, traditional is, this is the foundation, this is the root, this is the origin. Like, and you need to understand the history. You need to know, you need to at least know that this came first, and that this is foundational, and that this is important. And I like when people are able to take sort of agency and decide to walk and learn these things on their own. But I also really love when coaches or teachers or scene leaders have an appreciation for history and have knowledge for history, and then they decide to also infuse that in the lessons. Like, if you make it the norm, I think that shifts how people understand and receive. Because some people just want to dance, and that's totally fine. That's totally fine. But at no point should you have information like the history, like the culture that it's coming from, like the reason that it exists. At no point should those things be hard to access. Those things shouldn't be distant. They shouldn't be a second thought or an afterthought. It should be something that if you're teaching, you're not just teaching moves, you're teaching why that exists as well as you can, So with that, like again, I have no problem calling it bachazouk. Just don't call it bachata, because it's not. It's fundamentally not. It's just not what it is, and that's fine. I love fusion. Let's blend stuff together. Let's make swoop happen. I love, like, I'm here. I'm here for all of that, but call it what it is. Anyway, so I'm like, I'm about to get some folks upset, and that's okay. I'm okay. But there was a moment I remember where I was going to Lindy, and there was a kid on my on my hall. I know, I know he meant well, right? But my man was like, and it was just, mm, this moment like burned into my soul. But I was going to Lindy, and I'm the only black dude in the class. I'm the only one there, and I mean, like, I I credit my experience as an athlete as to why I could pick it up quick, because I did martial arts as a kid, because my parents were like, oh, you're not going to be breaking furniture and all this other kind of stuff. We're going to put you somewhere so you can take all that energy, put all the energy out somewhere, right? So martial arts and wrestling, being very aware of my body in space. And so I was like, oh, I did not dance growing up. Like that was not a thing I did. You know what I'm saying? I did that was not me. You were not gonna catch me dancing. But when I went, I was going because a friend invited me and because he wanted support because he was trying to, he liked the girl there. And I was like, all right, I'm gonna be there with you. I got you, brother. Like I'm locked in. And this kid on my hall, it's like, white kid, glasses, and he was like super calm, super chill, had never had an issue with it. He comes, he's like, I just think it's so cool that you're here. And I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, yeah, I just think it's so cool that that you are here yeah, that you are here, going to Lindy. It's just like it's so cool, man. Like, what do you mean by that? Now I know that I understand what he's saying. I know what he's saying, but I'm just like, no, like explain. Like, what do you what do you mean by that? Right? Right. And I don't know what it was. I don't know what it was about that moment exactly, but I saw how he was like, you know, like it's like he wouldn't say, I was like, no, say it. Like, say it. What do you mean? And it was something about it, even though again, it didn't feel like he was trying to be aggressive or anything like that. No, I still want to be gracious to a degree, but that was a moment that I think was part of me being like, yeah, this ain't for me. Like I'm not dancing for you. This is not a show that I'm putting on. I'm not like, and it I think my response then was I'm distancing myself from it rather than I'm coming in and I'm claiming this. I'm taking this is mine. Let me show like let me show because I think I've had that reaction. I've had that response before, but it was just something about that moment that stuck out where I'm like I'm not dancing for you. Like I'm not putting on a show. And that wasn't the first time I had heard something like that. I think that moment just kind of like that moment just boom, that moment stuck where I think, yeah, I'm not. I don't want to be part of this, you know. And although I won't, I don't want to go back and say, oh, I regret not getting into Lindy or anything. I very much love the dance journey that I've been on, and I love the dances that I've gotten to really internalize and get into. I might talk smack about Lindy here and there, but I actually really do. I think Lindy is dope. I really do. You know what I'm saying? I talk smack just because I had some friends who they were like heavy into Lindy, and I was like salsa's number one. So it was just like fake beef, right? But I think that was a moment where I was like, yeah, this isn't. I don't want to be part of something where people are gonna look at me and think, that's so great. Like I'm not trying to perform for you. I'm not putting a show on for you. This isn't something that you get to enjoy safely. Like this, we're not gonna divorce the history and the significant. Like, no, we're not doing that. Like you're gonna feel uncomfortable. I'm here to make you feel uncomfortable. I'm not here to to make this a digestible, safe experience for you. Yeah, that. So yeah, that brought up a lot of feelings. I was like, yeah, no, we're good. And again, I know he didn't mean anything. I know he wasn't intentionally trying to be disrespectful or anything like that. But it was that same feeling that I had when we went on we went on like these like service trips, and it was the same sort of feeling as seeing folks who they're willing to hold these black and brown children and say, oh, I need to get a new profile picture, right? But they won't go down the street to Harrisburg because they're like, oh, the city is dangerous. Ah, I'm like, oh, okay, cool. It's that same sort of like that same sort of feeling that I was feeling where I was like, yeah, nah, I'm not. Yeah, cut that. No, we're not doing that. That's not what we're gonna do. It was around like this wasn't this was like this all this stuff is like happening sort of in a context where the conversation around police brutality was like heavy, where conversation around racism and all these other things. I mean, I heard some of these folks talk about Obama in a way that was just like, I'm like, I'm right here, right? They're like, oh no, not you, not you, not you. I'm like, but do you hear? You can. Here's my thing. We can disagree all day. We can talk, but you can do it respectfully. If you start, and I'm it was like truly being sometimes being in the space, and I don't want to just badmouth it and be like, oh, it's all negative because it wasn't, right? But there were these moments where you'd have folks just like sort of air out these inner grievances that you can hear are like you didn't think about this at all. You didn't filter this through any kind of lens. Like this sounds like this is just like that good old like deep fried homegrown like just ignorance like true just I don't like and it I would be lying if I didn't say, that it didn't hurt to hear that or that, that it wasn't hard or, and I think it's very easy, like as a man to go to anger first, to be that'd be your first response, right? Like to just go right to, all right, let's go, right? Like that's not I don't think that's a healthy response, right? I don't think that's the right response. But it's also so hard sometimes because there's a sense of do they even care what they're doing? Like, do they even care how what they're saying and what they're putting out there like affects and hits other people? It's like there was a lot of talk, especially about they're like, oh, pro life, this, that, and the third. But I'm like, what about the lives that are like here? You know what I'm saying? And I'm not trying to go too far off, but it was these things where I'm like, you don't see the double standard here. Like, you don't hear how you don't hear this. Yeah. So
So,
a lot of stuff.
did you have any thoughts about breakdancing at Summer
Yeah.
Olympics or anything like that? I just before we move on.
Is that what we're calling it? I felt like yeah, I had a lot of fun. I enjoyed watching that. That was it was so bad. I say enjoyed because it was just such it was like I don't need to say anymore. I can just point to this as like this is what I'm talking like this is what I'm talking about. Like this is the most unseasoned chicken cutlet. I'm talking like this is what we're talking about when we talk about I can just picture it right now. But it's like this is an example I think of wanting the rhythm and not the blues. Like this is an example of someone who they look at something that they see and they think, yeah, I could do that. I think I could do it. And I don't know how much of the story is accurate or I've been somewhat removed from it, right? But I think there was a lot of I think there was something about her like leveraging um, her positions of influence or power to be able to get that position. And I was like, oh, that just adds to the story even more because it's a person who is clearly unqualified to be the representative of something that is like it. You cannot argue that breakdancing comes from Black culture, right? Like this is a core component of hip hop, and like you have this person who, from what I understand, does not care about any of that, but for whatever reason feels that they deserve to be there. It's just like this unmerited confidence and entitlement. And you just see that flounder on arguably the biggest stage in the world. And it's like yes, this is what happens when you're disrespectful and funky. Like this is what so like I don't want to I don't typically like to enjoy seeing people like flounder and fall, but I do honestly hope that there was a point where she was like, you know what, I'm the problem. This is me. I hope that it led to some kind of switch or some kind of thing. If it didn't, well then I will laugh even harder every time I see that video. But yeah, that was just funky. That was like, what are we doing? Like, come on, you had to like this is hip hop, right? Like you see my idea? Like like what like, come on, dog. That's why you need
Yeah.
friends to tell I'll say my first sort of like introduction to fusion or not to fusion, sorry, my first introduction to blues was that, right? Kind of being thrown into the deep end. And it did make me want to distance myself from it, but I wasn't completely like closed off because I was like, okay, well, I know this isn't it. I know this isn't. There's something about it. I was like, oh yeah, I know there's more to it than this, right? And I'm always gonna give something, I'll give it another go, I'll give it another try, right? Um, and I remember going to an event there that it's now a fusion event, right? But it was at that time it was a blues event, and it was very heavily like it was very clearly blues, but they started experimenting with kind of like electronic and just different music at the sort of later half of it, right? So it would start off very traditional, like very blues. And the funny thing about it is, at least as far as I'm aware, it was mostly white folks running it. And that kind of blew my mind a little bit because I was like, oh, this feels right. Like this feels right. And I think even when they were even in their teaching, it didn't feel like the goal or the aim was necessarily to provide like cultural education and to be really intentional about this, that, and the third. It felt like the people there were passionate, and it was a byproduct of like they really cared about blues, and they wanted blues to be fully represented as well as it could. So it was interesting seeing because the people who were, I think, like the core group, they really cared about blues, and a lot of the people there seemed like they really did. But then, as they would kind of like filter out, people, they leave the scene or they travel or they go other places. The people who kind of replaced it, it felt like it just started leaning heavily towards fusion, but they would still call it blues. And I enjoyed fusion, but they would call it blues, and it did like it started to not feel right. Like it started to have that sense of, you're saying it's this thing, right? But this is not what it is. You're mislabeling that. And it felt like the when they switched over to fusion, when they said, oh, this is fusion, and stopped trying to say this is blues or blues fusion, this is just fusion. Even if you say fusion with a blues bass or a blues undertone, fine, go ahead by all means, right? But like it felt like people would say, and I think that's still kind of a thing even now. People would say, "Oh yeah, like they're a blues dancer, their bass is blues," but they don't listen to blues music. They don't know blues history, right? They don't know like they don't. You say juking, and they're like, "I don't know what that is. I don't know what that means," right? Like it feels like, I know it's about code switching, so I don't want to like kind of lean into that, but I'm kind of going off on a tangent. But yeah, it definitely felt like there was that sort of. I think I came in at the perfect window to kind of see like, oh, this is kind of what it can look like, but then it started kind of switching. So it didn't. I just wasn't in Lindy enough to, I think, find where people who are like, no, this is the real, this is the authentic, this is like the true, where that was up until way later. And but by that point, I was already like, oh, this is when I'm dancing. I'm dancing this style. I'm focusing on this. I'm growing in this area. Um, there was what was the one? There was a I think of the oh, there was a place where they would have live blues music in my town, and going there was a much different experience because the music it was like these like kind of older guys playing music, right? And they're playing like they're playing blues, like they're playing like you're hearing 12 bar, and you're hearing real like bluesy blues. And there would be this group of dancers, it was usually some of those people who kind of were there at the beginning, who helped establish that blues scene, who would go. And a lot of these people just loved the music, which is interesting because although they loved the music and they loved the culture, they weren't necessarily. I'll just say we had a couple of political disagreements. I'll say that much, right? You know, but it was interesting because it felt like they still had more of an appreciation than most. I won't, go. I wouldn't be like, oh yeah, they're an ally, and they're this and that. I wouldn't say that, right? But I don't want to say they're reasonable either, right? I'm trying to find a good little balance. It's somewhere in there, but these were people who they did care, and you could at least, I think you could resonate on the fact that you care about dance and you care about making sure this thing is preserved as it should be. And I think that was something that it definitely helped put me in a place or in a mindset of I need to know what I'm talking about when I'm talking about it, and I need to make sure that like, but and I'm also like I'm not one to kind of shy away from who I am or what I represent or anything like that. It doesn't mean I'm trying to beat people over the head with my beliefs or my worldview or anything, but at the same time I'm like, oh no, I have an answer for why, and we can talk about it. We can talk about it. Which one you want? We can talk about this. We can talk about it. You know what I'm saying? But I definitely do think that like if you're teaching something, if you're learning, if you're teaching something, you should be teaching from a place of let me give you the entire context, let me give you the entire history, and rather than trying to be disingenuous or try to like if you're teaching, right? Like you don't need a black accent to teach blues. Like you don't be weird. Like don't be a weirdo. That's not you. That's not you. That's not native. That's not native to you. Like that's not natural for you, right? Don't do that. That's goofy. But at the same time, I think if you're open to what as a matter of fact, I mean, I would try to get as close to authentic as you can in terms of if you have black folks teaching, like learn from them, go. And I don't have an issue with somebody like I don't have an issue with somebody who is not from a particular cultural group teaching something, so long as they are doing the absolute best that they can to absorb, to understand, and pass it on. Because sometimes in the areas that you're in, like it's not there. Like where I live, right? It wasn't like we had this super diverse mix of people. I mean, where I lived in particular, there's a lot of black folks in my immediate area. That's why like I grew up even in wrestling. It was like my team was all I think it was all black minus but we had a couple. I think we had a couple. We had a couple Puerto Ricans on our team, right? And we had like one white kid, right? And it was like we didn't go into college. It was like boom, switch, total opposite. And traveling around, going in these different areas, when we would compete, it was a lot of that was like, oh, I see me on the other team, and we're like, what's good? How we doing? Like it was like it was understood. We go into a room, and we're like, yo, we're here, right? We're here. And there were things that that we understood, we could say in like shorthand that others are like, oh, do you know that guy? I'm like, no, but yes, right? Like it's just it's understood. But like all that just to say, like if you can, right? If you can learn, you can absorb from someone from that group. Like yeah, go to them, go to the source, go to the person who is someone who has a personal connection and a passion and a desire for people to understand this in its entirety, right? But like if I don't know if Jill Doe is trying to teach right is trying to teach salsa and cumbia and like she's passionate, she's on fire, and she's like, hey, I'm doing everything I can to make sure that this is what it, I'm not opposed to it. I'm not mad at that at all. I'm like, no, if you're passionate, you're on fire, you're truly serious about it. Yeah, by all means. I'm not tripping over that. That's just me. I'm like, my thing is I care more about a person who is passionate and trying to represent it in its fullness more than I do about someone who is like, well, I come from this. Because then that's the same thing where, there's this attitude sometimes folks have when they come into dance where they're like, oh, I grew up dancing. And it's like, yeah, but your connection is trash. Like I don't know what you're trying to do. You're doing a lot of this arm stuff. I'm like, I don't know what that means. I don't know what that is. Respectfully, what's happening, right? Like I don't understand. You know what I'm saying? Are you catching a cab? Like what's going on? Anyways, yeah. So and I'm like, I didn't grow up doing this. I'm better now because I practiced. I applied myself. I was in class watching YouTube videos and breakdowns of dance when I should have been paying attention. Okay, like I listen. I'm like, my grade suffered for this, like, no, this was earned, okay? Like, this wasn't just some, like, some thing I was just infused with. Like, I just saw a vision of my ancestors and they said, left foot, right foot. I was like, yes, got it, right? Like, no, that didn't happen. Like, and it's wildly disrespectful and diminishing for people to say stuff like that. And I don't think, I don't think folks realize how insulting it is until they've had like a similar experience where someone essentially like shortchanges your effort and they're like, oh yeah, you just had that. That was just in you. That was just that. And it's like, no, like I worked for this. Like I put work in for this. Like you're not gonna tell me. And they're like, oh yeah, you didn't earn this. Like you were just given. Like no, I worked for this. I worked for this. You know. I sorry, just a small thing. The funniest thing to me is like I'll in especially when I'm dancing, like when I'm dancing like salsa bachata, like I've gotten when folks they'll ask me like what are you and like folk they ask me like this happens. I mean, it's like it's a norm, but like what are you? And I'm like black because I know what they're asking. I know what they're asking. I'm like I'm black. I'm American black, 100% black, born and raised, like homegrown. You know what I'm saying? Like my parents are black. Like they were born, like just like straight up like I'm from Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. You know what I'm saying? My family on my dad's side is from Virginia. My mom's side is from like Mississippi slash Illinois. You know what I'm saying? So I'm like I am black, and they're like, okay, but are you? Because I've got Dominican, I've got Puerto Rican, I've got Cuban, right? Like I'm like I no, I just I care to learn and to understand. And I'm like, I don't think I'm the best or the greatest. I know I have areas to grow in my dancing and in my moving and everything, but I'm trying to be as honoring, but also as authentic as I can be. Honoring in the sense that like I'm not just gonna try to take something and say, oh, I did this or whatever, right? But I'm like, what is the history? What is the root? What is the meaning of this? What's the significance of this movement? Why does this song matter? Why does this subject matter important? Right? Like what is being talked about here? And then also, what am I feeling? What am I coming from? What am I bringing? Who am I as a person? And what do I want to release to this? How am I bringing these two things together? So I'm not mad at it. I'm not mad at it when folks are like, all right, you're Dominican, like I'm like, no, no, I'm not. I'm not, right? Like my Spanish needs work. I can dance in Spanish better than I can like speak it. It's just um I was just like thinking like I had this like older lady. It was at the last time I was at a salsa venue out here, and she like kind of leans in she's like telling me like come because it's super loud, and she's like where are you from? Like where are you from? Like asking me because she started speaking Spanish, and I was kind of like I'm sorry. I was like she's like telling me to come in. I was like she's like where are you from? And I was like South Central. I mean, like that's where I'm living. And she's like, no, like where are you from? And I was like, I'm from Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. And she's like, no, like where are you from? Like where are your people from? Type thing. And I was like, I mean, if we go far back enough, you know what I'm saying? If we go far back enough, right? And she's like, no, like where are you? Like what I'm asking, right? And I was like, I was like, man, look, I'm not. She's like, you're not Cuban. I was like, I'm not Cuban. She's like, are you sure? And I was like, I'm sure. I'm sure. No, I don't. Yeah, no. I don't take offense. But I think I will say this. I will say this real quick about about code switching. I don't try to code switch or try to like make people feel more comfortable. But I will say that I've noted that often I have to kind of take on a certain kind of like a certain sort of I don't say persona, right? Where I'm definitely more particular about what I say, like more precise in what I say. And I think I take up after my dad because he was very very outspoken in a lot of ways and just very very active in how he dealt with situations. Like he was the kind of person, if you said something crazy to him, he was going to let you know that that wasn't okay. But he was going to let you know in like Times New Roman, you know what I'm saying? It was like, it was going to be boom. Like he was going to academically read you. Right. And I know that when I go into certain places, especially, you know, like from, you know, wrestling at a young age and going to these places where like our team is the only color that town is seeing, you know, having referees or having these instances where, you know, folks are they're looking at us as lesser or treating us like less, or they're, you know, they're saying, you know, crazy stuff or whatever. Like my response is like, oh, you're not gonna see me sweat. You're not gonna see me, you know, you're not gonna see me bleed. So when I say like I'll talk in a certain way, it's a lot more like, you know, to the point and to like I'm trying to think of how to sort of describe it because I don't it's almost this sort of like you can't say anything that I'm gonna show. Like it's almost like this poker face, and that becomes sort of like this mask or this distancing. So even when I would go, you know, go out dancing or go to these places, right, and get those comments, those like you weren't gonna see me react or respond to that. You weren't gonna I might feel a lot of things, but that wasn't something that I was gonna, you know, that I was gonna show or kind of let come across. And then I also remember going to like when I would go to places and I would see that there were more like there was more black folks there. I was like, oh, I can relax. And it just felt so strange and so like I don't want to say alien, right? But it was just such like a like what? Like oh, there's four of us here, right? Like no, like but like what like go it was like this sense of like, oh, I can take off all this baggage that I didn't even know I was carrying. And I felt the way that I would dance and the way that I would move, it was so much more free and so much more expressive and so much more emotional. Um, where that feeling, that sense, I was like, man, I want to carry this with me wherever I go. But also at the same time, I know there are folks who are watching and they might see that and they don't get it or they don't want to get it or they don't appreciate it or whatever it is, right? So I don't know. It definitely matters to have places where folks can feel like they're being honored and they're being appreciated and they're being respected, not ogled at or over sexualized or um, viewed like there's an exhibition or something, you know. Um, yeah, actually, this kind of came up yesterday too. It's funny. We so okay, so a distinction that this is how I would like draw a distinction between the two. I think you can have sensual dances that are not necessarily sexual, right? You can dance in a way that is the way I would describe like, you know, sensual versus sexual is that sensual is very much being it's very much present and it tends to be more more about meeting and matching where a person is, matching their level of comfort or matching their level of intent, right? You can have a sensual dance that involves minimal contact, where it's present and it always has a certain sort of I would describe as a certain kind of sweetness to it. Like it's not it doesn't take a person and reduce them to parts. It doesn't make them you know pieces of themselves or it doesn't you know it doesn't fetishize someone or something like that, right? It's like you're taking the person as they are but also you're meeting them where they're at. So that's what I would and I would also say like you know that's where I would also describe it as like intimacy where you're just you're there, it's you and it's them and that's what's happening. It's about keeping that moment and you can have these very sweet um just reciprocal like giving moments with people that doesn't cross a line or boundary or make people feel uncomfortable but makes people feel seen and feel respected and feel in some ways feel empowered, right? Like you can have these moments. The way that I would describe these sort of like the switch from that to sexual is when it's about self gratification or it's about taking or consuming where it becomes this thing where you're trying to, regardless of how another person feels, get what you want out of it. And yeah, like I've had, the funny thing about it is it has happened so often over the course of the, I think I've been dancing for like, I started kind of early 2012, whatever. I mean, I took breaks though, so there were breaks in there, but like I've been in it for a minute, and during that, it's like you can almost tell immediately when a person is on one end versus the other. Like you feel it, you feel it, and I can imagine that I can imagine that that being a woman in the space is, I don't even say I can imagine, just like I've heard some horror stories. Like I've heard some things where I'm just like, oh, like, yo, this is what y'all are going through, this is what you got to deal with. Like having to be conscious of everything from what you're and not to say in any way, shape, or form that that it's the fault of the person, because of what you're wearing. Like just because you're wearing X, Y, and Z doesn't mean you're inviting, into attention and things like that. But you have to be super conscious of like where you're going, who's where. Like having to constantly be clocking and watching and looking is just like, that's it feels like a lot. And I'll say in my experience, like I've had people cross lines of boundaries, all good, it's all okay. Like I've had folks target me. I've had folks say some wild things. I remember somebody, this wasn't even like the craziest thing that somebody said, but I remember somebody was just like, they were, well, as we are dancing, they're like, "Oh, I just like love your skin and you're this and you're that." And but it was like it was just super weird. Like it wasn't, and I can imagine if the roles were reversed, that person would have been like security, right? And because I think sometimes people will look and they're like, oh, like this guy works out, this guy's in shape, whatever. I can just like say stuff and just like lob my lust at him. Like I start wearing a wedding band when I go because I'm just like, I'm not dealing with all this extraness. Like some of y'all need to chill, and I feel like it's helped, especially when I go to places that like I'm new at, or I don't haven't really gone to a lot. It's definitely helped, but there's a friend of mine suggested that she was like, yo, this might help a little bit. But even then, like I've had people grope and just extra on the connection, extra and this, that, and the third, or not, like I've had people like legitimately just straight up like grab my butt, or like just like weird stuff like that happen, where I'm like, no, like this is, hold up, stop, wait a minute, this is not what we're gonna do. This is not what's happening. This is not okay. And it's always funny seeing people like realize, oh, I didn't know. Like, what do you mean you didn't know? What do you like? What do you think this was? I didn't give you any kind of sign, any kind of signal. There was no green light. This was you looking and saying, "Oh yeah, this is what's going to happen." Um, and I understand, the nature of dance, and how you're being very open, and you're opening yourself, and you're kind of, it gives its, depending on especially the dance and all of that, right? It can be very um vulnerable, right? Where you're truly sharing parts of you that maybe you don't share with others, or you don't share often. But there's also a level of, I think, maturity and awareness where you can't just go into a situation and start just throwing things at and towards people. Like that's off. You know, it's like, I don't want to say like trauma dumping, but it's almost like lust dumping. To a degree, right? It's like, I'm sure there's a better phrase or term for it or something like that, but that's happened in ways, and like I've had these little comments, where it's, I'd say more so earlier on, and I try to be very like vigilant in the way that I dance now, where I try to start off with a very clear, we're meeting here, and then gradually, it, like, if you're showing yourself as safe, respectable, et cetera, then we can get closer. Like once that trust has been established, okay, cool, we can go there, we can have dances that, like, if the song is calling for, for close embrace, okay, cool, we can go there. But if the song is calling for, it's higher energy, it's open, it's this, it's that, and the third, and you're like, here, I'm like, we gonna move back a little bit. Like you're getting a little too close. You know, I don't need your thumb in my belt loop. Like, calm down. We don't we don't need this right now. Like this is, so the thing is, I don't want to, I don't want to, just, say outright like I think this is all happening because I'm black. Um, although I'm sure it plays into some folks, um, some of the actions or interactions of some folks. But I will definitely say that I think there are ideas that some people bring into certain dances. And I can say more so with bachata, where like there's this idea that it's just innately sexual, that it's innately like, oh yeah, it's a Latin, especially no disrespect, but to folks who come, like I'd say more, I don't say Europe specifically, just like paint a broad, stroke, but a lot of the time the dancers that I've encountered from outside the US, from Europe, and then folks who just have a limited, like they don't really, they don't get out of their bubble too much, right? They're not interacting very much with people of color. They're not really like, out here, is that their idea is like, oh, this is sexual. That's what they bring into it, right? And it tends to be this like, okay, that's just what we're supposed to do here. And then, there has to be this moment of like, someone has to hold up, wait, pause. That's not what this is. That's, and even if that's a part of it, that's not the entire thing. Every dance doesn't need to be you breathing, down my neck. I don't need to know what you had for breakfast this morning. You know what I'm saying? I don't. That's too much. I shouldn't be able to tell what kind of cereal you like. Like, no, like back up. I don't know you like that. Like, woo. And even then, there's technique where you can have a dance that looks a certain way but doesn't feel a certain way, where it doesn't feel like it's disrespectful or it's all these other things. So yeah, I do think there are these ideas that people carry into these dances, into blues, into bachata, into even into salsa, or even into like, I don't know, like there are these ideas that people carry, I think, where they just assume, actually, even I would say even kids to a degree, to kizomba and to urban kids, those are two that I'm learning, that I wouldn't say that I know, but I would definitely say that I'm learning. Like I've gone to some classes, and at one point I was like making a dedicated effort, but there's a lot of dancing in LA, so it's kind of hard to keep up with everything. But there is definitely this sort of energy that some people will carry into it. And I think it's when you see something and you don't understand it, but rather than trying to understand it, you just go off of what you saw. Like, okay, I think I figured it out, right? That's where you start to miss a lot of these, sort of norms or values or expectations, or sort of cultural basis. So I'll just say that, like, with hip hop, it's amazing because you'll see, like, when you look at just mainstream artists, just that part, right? People will have this idea of what hip hop is or what hip hop should be or whatever, and they base it on that, right? There's no deeper diving. There's no understanding of you don't even have to go to the origins or the roots of hip hop, but of artists beyond just the Spotify top whatever, right? Like, they'll just look at that and say, okay, that's just what this is. And we'll make these large sort of sweeping, generalizations about hip hop, about black culture, about rap music, about like all these things. Like, they're just like, oh, this is just what it is, and I understand it, and I get it because I've listened to a Lil Wayne album, or whatever. I listen to Drake. I'm like, Drake, right? Like, what do you mean? Like, but they're like, oh, I know enough. I'm good, right? And it's like, you didn't even touch the culture. Like, this is a periphery of something that's not even native to hip hop. Like, this is you're touching on something on the outside of the outside. That is this. It's a caricature. Like, it's not what it is, right? It's just not. It takes elements and things, and it might kind of sound like it. But when I say kind of sound like it, I mean it only kind of sounds like it. There's not an appreciation for, like, I'm trying not to rant about this, but it's just such a it's hard. It's hard though because people will look at it and they think they understand it because they've had this thing. They're like, yeah, I know, I'm good, right? They'll dismiss going deeper, and I think it's I'd say it's intellectually lazy um, to do that, but I also understand that there's a lot happening in people's lives, and sometimes they just don't give themselves the capacity to go deeper, right? But I'm like, if all you know is I don't know, like Lil whoever, right? And that's what you're basing this all on. Then like, yeah, you're lost. Like you are lost. Like you don't care enough to understand that. Like this isn't even. I'm like, we don't claim that. We don't even claim them. Like this is not like, yeah. I'm about to start ranting about record labels and all that kind of stuff. I'm like, I don't need to do all that right now, but figure a way to put it into something, label it, and then you can mass market it. It
Yeah.
has to have a formula. It has to be, it has to be scalable. Like that's the lens that they view it through. But like art is often not that. Like life is often not that. You can't really put these things, and even if you can put them in a box or a label, it's only sometimes that thing. So it ends up becoming this thing that it's divorced and devoid of the real life, the weight, you know. I've heard that, and kind of on the opposite end, like there were some folks who very much into traditional blues, like very much into like their I think their heart was in a good place, but at the same time, they were like, I'll say this is back, right. Um, but they kind of had this air of there's kind of like an arrogance around it, and they were kind of like it went from just like, oh, we want to preserve, to like, it was better back then, like, it's the same thing I hear when people talk like, oh yeah, hip hop was better back in the day, and then they start naming it. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like a hippie did hip hop. It's fun, it's cool, right? But like it's gotten objectively better. You know what I'm saying? And we yes, 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 like we stand on the shoulders of giants. Like Nas is one of my favorites of all time, right? Nas is one of my favorites, right? Illmatic, I think Illmatic was one of the first three albums I ever heard, like hip hop albums I ever heard. It was Illmatic, Black on Both Sides by Mos Def, and Food and Liquor by Lupe Fiasco. I remember where I was when I heard it. I remember my feelings, my expressions, my emotions. I was like, oh, right. Like it was just like this, like the sky opened up. You know what I'm saying? It was like, yeah, it was that, right? I remember those moments. And at the same time, like I'm not gonna act like JID isn't killing it, or like there aren't artists who have made amazing songs that are inspired by these artists. I think there's this thing that happens where people kind of get locked in and they think, oh, this is it. This is when it was at its peak, instead of understanding that life and that art is ever flowing, and it's constantly growing and adapting and changing because it's interacting with the times. Like the people are living and breathing, so the expression is going to be living and breathing. But they'll get this weird, like they would get this weird attitude where they're talking like, oh yeah, like there's no good blues music, there's no more good blues, there's no more. I'm like, Kingfish, what are you talking about? Like they're like no, there's no good. Like it's like, stop with all that. They like, no. Um and 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 I think like that, again, I think I understand where it comes from. I'm trying to be, gracious to people who can't defend themselves and whatnot, but like there would be this like nostalgia around it that I feel like keeps it stagnant, where it just becomes this puddle where there's no life, there's nothing in it, there's nothing moving, and it just continues to breed this sort of toxic muck or goo, right? Because you're just standing in it, you're saying it has to be this and it can't be anything else. There's nothing flowing into it. There's nothing bringing new ideas or new life into it. Um, yeah, and also at the same time, I'm like, blues. Do you understand? Like, do you understand not just blues? Yes, but like whether it's actually blues, whether it's blues or it's hip hop, or like, do you understand what Black folks was going through? during these periods of time, because if you listen, you'll hear it. Like, again, going back to the World War II joint, I'm like, what business do I have being there? And like, oh yeah, but we won. This is, I'm like, did we? Did I? Like, what are you talking about? Like, what do you mean? They're like, oh well, things have gotten better. I'm like, y'all got a weird view of history that I just don't share. I can't get with that. So it's like there's something about it that at least here, right? I'm sure it's much different. I haven't had a lot of time to, and I'll be honest, I haven't intentionally said I'm going to sit into blues and I'm gonna, you know, yeah, I'm not a fan of the whole, like, oh yeah, things were better back then and this, then the third. It's like, stop with that, because I'm like, what, you want me to dress up as the help? Like, what do you mean? Like, what are you saying? And you're like, yeah, let's all just dress up like that era. I'm like, no, I don't want to do that. That doesn't sound like a good time. Great folks who are doing, like, they're being incredibly, they're one, they have very, like, they understand and have the vernacular down, like they are moving well, but they also care about the history. They are sharing that. They're not shying away from the conversation about, like, this is where this came from, this is the context, that this dance was cultivated in. And so, like, they do both really well. Like, they have the art and the expression. Like, they have both those things, or the history and the expression. And I mean, I definitely, I did a lot more like solo dancing. I would just, it was more so me in the mirror type of thing. I'd play music and I was just interacting, figuring out what I wanted from the song or how I wanted to move. And it's funny, I mean, well, I have like folks like, oh, are you a hip hop dancer? And I'm like, no, I'm just black. Like, that's not. I'm like the straight, but like, I'm being totally straight. I'm just like, yeah, like, nah, like, I like, this is the music that I listen to. I mean, I listen to a wide range of music, but like, this is music that it touches a part of me that I want to also move through and express through. So naturally, like, I might have more of an affinity for music that has a certain kind of something to it, and I'm gonna move a certain way to that. But I also can, I can floral and, all, like, I'm not trying to put myself in a particular box or anything, but also at the same time, I'm like, yeah, like, this is me, this is home, this feels good. So during that period, I was definitely spending more time dancing with myself. I think in terms of, like, learning history and learning sort of the background, that was something I won't I didn't I don't think there was a point where I wasn't trying to learn more, but I'm also naturally gonna ask questions and kind of dive into it. That being said, I thought that a lot of times I see these things, and I felt like people were, they do, like, oh, they want to dance on Zoom. I'm like, I don't like being on Zoom. I don't want to do that. I do that for work. I don't want to do. I'm like, I don't want to be on Zoom. So I see these things and people are like, oh yeah, we're gonna get on Zoom. We're gonna dance. I love that for y'all. I hope y'all have a great time. I don't. I'm not trying to. Oh, I gotta make sure the camera's here and the lighting is good. And I was like, that's not. That's not. But I do think it was super valuable, especially like, I think people, kind of come together and maintaining that sort of connection, and then also saying, like, let's learn, and let's be intentional when we come back. Like, let's change it. I think that can be seen in a lot of areas. I do feel like the dance scene, the dance community, while rebuilding, is it feels fresher in a lot of ways. It feels like it was a hard reset where, like, okay, now we can rebuild and things can be different. Even especially around, like, safety and consent. I felt like that was something that it wasn't, it was weird. It felt like, to me, it was weird because it was like it was understood, but not necessarily acknowledged or taken serious. And I feel like coming back, it was like, oh, like, this is here. And like I feel better about inviting friends or telling people, hey, go here, go to this place. Because they do this well, or with others being like, nah, that's not it. Don't go there unless you plan on getting licked. Don't pull up there. That's not the place you want to be. It's it's like look, if that's the kind of night you're trying to have, this is the place for you. If not, over there, right? Like it's yeah, you know what? I would say it was kind of like a it was I'd say it was a lot more white, but I think that's also because that was just like the demographics of the area. But there were these black folks there. Like I knew one of the bassists, actually went to church
Oh,
with one of the bassists and like kind of grew up. He's older, right? But so he's like kind of seen me grow up. And he was kind of like doing him like what are you doing here, right? And then he saw me dancing. He was like, I see why you're here, and I was like, I do be here. And I'm like, I'm glad you're here because he could play, right? And like that, there were so it was you had a mix. It was predominantly white, but you also
mhm.
did have a mix of people. I think I was usually one of the handful of black dancers there, so I definitely stood out. But I also think because I like I think especially being in a place like that, and then something about live music is just like it just like activates you, that I would dance in a bigger way, not bigger meaning like just visually bigger, but bigger meaning
Fuller.
like more, yeah, like more. There's more soul in it, more, and yeah, I think it was evident that I was like, yo, I'm enjoying myself. I'm not wearing a mask. Like I'm supposed to be here. I'm supposed to be here, whether you appreciate it or like it or not. Which not saying folks were hostile. If anything, people were like, oh my goodness, right. But I was like, I'm not doing it for you. I'm doing this for me, and I'm enjoying it. Type of thing. So
You had mentioned juking, so it's like, did you beyond, your first initial, like, deep end thrown in the deep end, did you actually, like, go to some, like, workshop weekends, or did you, how
mhm.
did you find out a little bit more about the blues, idioms and stuff?
YouTube.
Did you Oh, okay, that's true.
I
You're
mean,
saying you're
honestly,
always
no, no, no. Like genuinely, like I would say, like YouTube. There's a lot of really good resources available online, which is one of those areas where I'm like, yeah, you don't really have an excuse. Like I think
Yeah,
if you don't know, like okay, you don't know, right? But you can learn if you're at the same place, you know, um, as you were a year ago or 2 years. Like it's like you information is available. You're choosing to not grow. Like stagnation is a choice. I do believe stagnation is a choice. So but yeah, YouTube conversations with people. I mean, like if you talk to dancers, dancers will tell you things. And like they have like there were things available. There are blues events available. There are these things happening. There are teachers and workshops and whatnot. And maybe finance is a reason that you're not able to go to these places, which I understand, right? But like YouTube is free, like Google is free. Like you can use these resources to learn and to understand as much as you can until you can do better or do more, right? So yeah, that honestly I think that was because I would learn in different pockets and different periods because I did have a phase where I was like, oh, I want to learn West Coast swing and like learning about history of West Coast swing and learning about sort of the things around that, and then also blues. Like I was like, oh, okay, I'm gonna kind of learn more about blues, and then that's where I was like introduced to do something blue, and then or not introduced. I found do something blue online, and then there through conversation, people were like, oh yeah, ACF, that's happening. You should come. I'm like, all right, I'm gonna check it out. Like I remember seeing the website where it was like the largest blues thing in LA. I was like, oh shoot, I need to go up here. It's like I think it was in Pasadena and everything, and I was
yeah.
like, I need to go to that. This sounds like the place to be. And I remember stepping in with a friend of mine and being like, they know some of these folks know what they're doing up here. Like, okay, they did good up here. Oh, hold up. Like, this is not, and it was, I'll say this too. It wasn't, it wasn't hippy dippy blues. Like, it wasn't that, like, sort of like watered down, at least from what I saw at that point. It wasn't like this, like, watered down thing. It was like, oh no, like, this is what it is. Like, this is actually like in its, I don't say in its fullness per se, right? But it was like, oh yeah, like there are folks here who are they're really dedicated to this. And then seeing that juxtaposition, with fusion, I mean, like, oh, okay, okay, like this is what this is supposed to look like, and this is what this can be. And they're both beautiful things, but they are different things, you know.